All right, trustees, we are live. We are recording. Phone lines are opened. Go for it.
I'd like to welcome everyone to the regular meeting of the East Hampton Town Trustees for March 9th, 2026. I'd like to open with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America, which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Arlene, can you do roll call, please?
Yes, certainly. John Aldred. Here. Francis Ma.
Here.
David Cataletto. Patrice Golden. Here. Tim Garneau. Ben Dollinger.
Here.
And Celia Josephson. Here. Jim Grimes. There. And Bill Taylor.
Yeah, you saw
Yeah,
me.
I saw you. Bill Taylor. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Cecilia. Forgot my name.
Okay. We'll start with public. Well, we're going to start with the report from Dr. Chris Gobler, water quality analysis.
Okay. Good evening, and thanks for having me here. I'm going to present the results from over the last year, and we'll just get started. Yeah, so go ahead. Right, well, I mean, we all know why we're here, and that's to protect the waters of East Hampton, and they are pretty productive waters. Next slide. With regards to both shellfish and finfish, largest fishery in New York State, right here in East Hampton waters. And in general, you know, with being surrounded by the open waters of Gardiner's Bay, Block Island Sound, Atlantic Ocean, you know, the waters here are very well flushed with clean ocean water. But you know, as we all know, over the years, particularly the last decade or 2 decades, there has been a decent amount of development across East Hampton, and some of these water bodies are rather enclosed, and so the land use changes have the potential to be impacting enclosed water bodies. And of course, any activity on land is going to be affecting the groundwater, which then is flushing out into surface waters. And you know, we'll talk about it more through later in the talk, but you know, excessive nitrogen loading from land to sea, primarily from septics, but also from fertilizer, can be a strong driver for these ecosystems. And this just shows a map showing all of Long Island, and this is made up just for last year. So essentially observations for my lab, essentially from April through September of last year. And what it shows is the occurrence of what we call harmful algal blooms and low oxygen conditions. And you can see, yes, occurrences here in East Hampton, but obviously not alone. They're all throughout Long Island, particularly Suffolk County. On the harmful algal bloom front, we're going to talk about a few different species, and those are ones that can grow to a density that has a negative impact on either humans and or the ecosystem. And you know, another issue, of course, we're tracking is how changes in water quality affect shellfish. You know, the Peconic-based shell fishery collapsed in the 80s. That actually is what got me started in my marine science career. That was my inspiration. There was a great comeback in the first decade of this, close to 2 decades of this century, but unfortunately, that fishery is in very bad shape, and it's partly because of a parasite that it has, but there's environmental stressors involved there as well. Next slide. We're going to talk about fecal contamination of surface waters, which are a public health threat, both via swimming and via contamination of shellfish. And, you know, when we think about that, we need to think about how water is coming from land to sea to potentially deliver these pathogens. Might be different than the way that the nitrogen, for example, comes from land to sea. And we'll be comparing to standards for shellfishing, fecal coliform bacteria, and that's a state standard, and we'll be comparing to the swimming standard for a different bacteria according to the state health department. And we'll also be comparing results we get to areas in East Hampton town waters that are open to shellfishing, closed to shellfishing, and then temporarily open. Next slide. I'm not going to talk a lot about microbial source tracking, although I do have an important update on that. And as a reminder, this is a way to track where bacteria are coming from biologically, not via physical movement. Next slide. Okay, so the main thing that we're looking at here, therefore, overall, is water quality across lots of sites. I'll show the sites, both marine and fresh water. Again, look at the harmful algal blooms, the bacteria, and then some deep dives into some individual water bodies. Next slide. And the work began in the spring. It went through into the fall. And we sampled more than 24 locations. All the analyses, or most analyses, are done in my lab back at Southampton. Several things are measured on site as well. And in all cases, we're comparing the data to state standards or federal recommendations. Okay, and then this shows all the different sampling sites in marine and fresh water bodies, although even some of them are missing there. I think the next slide is a table. There's a full listing here, like I said, 25 different sites. And if you just do one more click, seems like I'm saying this every year, but this is the most sites ever. And we always seem to be adding some. Maybe at some point we'll decide to pull some back. But, okay, next slide. And now we can get into the results. So one more. Just starting with temperature, not very exciting. It's a good warm-up slide. However, it gives you a sense. We'll have a lot of slides like this that look at all the different sites from the different systems. You can see multiple stations within each system. And for temperature, I just put up the relative, which is really the maximum temperature you want to get to for seagrass. And you can see we're, as a maximum for the season, we're getting above that. Next slide. Okay, chlorophyll is a proxy for the total amount of phytoplankton or algae in the water. NOAA and EPA usually says don't want to go above 20 micrograms per liter. That's a level at which you start having cascading ecosystem effects. And you see most of the observations are below that, below 10, and that's a good place to be. But you also see that there's a few different sites in each of the different systems that do get above that. You can see a very dense bloom in 3 Mile Harbor, the back end of Hog Creek, the back end of 3 Mile Harbor, and even in Northwest Creek. All these sites can be prone to these events. Next slide. And this is just showing the event in one of the blooms within the back end of 3 Mile Harbor. Bloom we hadn't seen a lot of in this place, something called euglena, which actually does make a bioactive compound that can be harmful to the marine.
Euglena was a protozoan.
Yes, it is a protozoan. So protozoan just means single-celled organism.
Okay.
Yeah. Next slide. And so on average, again, in happy news, the averages were below that maximum, but we did have those excursions. Next slide. Okay, on the harmful algal bloom front, we're going to look at 3 different species here. Next one. And we're going to start with Alexandrium that makes saxitoxin. Saxitoxin is can cause what's known as paralytic shellfish poisoning. It's a neurotoxin. Next slide. And so we did have a bloom of fairly large intensity in 3 Mile Harbor. It's not an all-time record, but it's higher than we usually see. And you can see it persisted at pretty high levels, above 1,000 cells per liter, has potential to make shellfish toxic, and it was sustained almost 3 weeks. So this is above average for sure. And I'm going to put this in that 12 or 13-year perspective later. Next slide. Another species we track is Dinophysis, also makes a toxin. This is a gastrointestinal toxin, so probably not as dangerous as saxitoxin, but nonetheless something we don't want getting into shellfish. And this bloom was actually pretty substantial. It went on, as you can see, for much of June and even into July. And that peak, I'm pretty sure, is the highest we've ever seen. And again, I'm going to put this in perspective later in the talk.
Is there a specific station that?
Yes, so we, for 3 Mile Harbor, the primary site so it's 3 Mile Harbor, and it's specifically in the back end there, yeah. Next slide. And then finally, we also in the summer look at this rust tide species, next slide. And this has been fairly ephemeral, year to year, a lot of variation, but we saw almost none in 2024, and the levels were relatively low in 2025. So, this particular harmful algal bloom species is trending in the right direction for us. And it's one that we had never even seen in Long Island before 2004, and was very, very intense. Maybe now it's becoming a little bit more mild, but I'll show you the 10-year trend later. Next slide. Okay, oxygen, all marine life needs oxygen to persist. Here again are the average levels and the minimum levels that we saw in the marine water bodies. Daytime oxygen levels, we shouldn't make too much of, and you'll see why later. But in general, these are good numbers, but they are daytime. So I'll talk more about that later. I think actually I'll give an example on the next slide. Because there is day-night variability. The levels are high during the day, but they also get low at night. And so just making a measurement during the day is really a biased data set. So for example, next slide, this is day-night monitoring on a sensor in the back end of 3 Mile Harbor. You can see a couple of dashed lines there. Those are for the two different oxygen, the chronic and acute threshold set by the DEC. And again, during the day, the oxygen levels were always good, but it's at night that the levels drop. And this is not inconsequential. We've actually just published a paper within the last year, essentially showing that when you have these nighttime drops in oxygen, just as one example, shellfish growth rates drop dramatically. You can have like 100 or 200% decrease in their growth rates, because essentially, if there's no oxygen, they're literally
Is there an amount of time they can do without oxygen?
They can get by. So this isn't lethal, but it slows their growth rate down. Again, in some cases by 100 or 200% over an extended period of time. And that is bad. I mean, nobody wants if you're a bayman, you want the shellfish getting to market size as quickly as possible. But if you're a bivalve, you also want to get as big as quickly as possible, because it's the littlest ones that are the most vulnerable to predators. And so this essentially could stunt their growth and leave them open to predation. Next slide. Okay, and these things were all related. Next slide. It's at the nitrogen loading. I think you got to do like a couple more clicks there. Oh, okay. So the nitrogen is what kicks it off. So we do now measure total nitrogen as well. The Peconic Estuary Program, upon its founding and their first management plan, had a target for nitrogen that would be ideal for seagrass. And what we see is that about on average, every site had an exceedance, but we want to look at the average. About half the sites are over that level. Varies by system. Locations that are closer to the mouth and the inlet of enclosed water bodies are less likely to go over. But in general, this just shows, that high nitrogen shows you the effect of land-based nitrogen loading affecting these systems. Next slide. And this is where I go back and look at the data since 2014. One more and one more. Okay, and so I'll just go through these quickly. Thanks to the support of the trustees, we do have a long-term record now, so we can actually see what's going on. And so we have temperatures are trending upward. It's not totally dramatic, but it's in some way on the one hand. On the other hand, actually, since it's only been 13 years, it's a little surprising that we're actually seeing an upward trend. Although it's consistent with what we're seeing this century in summer. So summer tends to be a season where it's warming faster than other seasons. Next slide. Surface water salinity levels are in contrast, are actually dropping a little bit. And so that suggests a little bit more runoff from land to sea, depressing those levels. Obviously a lot of year-to-year variability, but the overall trend is lower than where we started.
Chris, have you ever tried to quantify The irrigation contribution to that lower salinity number?
No, but it certainly would contribute, but, there's gonna be a lag also. So on the water places would contribute a lot more, and as you move back in time, in space, I'm sorry, it takes longer for that effect to be seen. So on the water properties, yeah, a lot of irrigation during summer probably would have an effect.
No, because I've seen it, like, we do a lot of wetland restoration, and we have sites that are really, like, I want to say Georgia Pond, that are brackish water systems. Okay, but when we plant those, sometimes depending on the upland makeup of plants and the irrigation, we have to kind of mitigate by using more freshwater species, because some of those brackish water tidal species, they don't survive. And you'll see plants like Juncus effusius growing right down at the shoreline where it really shouldn't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, irrigation certainly in the near shore regions will have an effect certainly on the salinity there. So, but that's a it's a fair hypothesis. I can't address it right now, but it's something I would want to think about a little bit more too. So, but certainly if like I said, my first reaction would be yes, the near shore properties. Yeah. Next slide. Definitely strong trend in chlorophyll. Again, year-to-year variability. It's not a straight line, but things are definitely increasing from where we started, where the levels were relatively low, significantly higher now, and specifically in see places that jump out: 3 Mile Harbor, Hog Creek, and also Accabonac. More so than say Neff Peak and Northwest. Next slide. Oh, and this I'm just showing here the where we started to where we are now. So again, not a huge change for Northwest and Napeague, but definitely if you take those two out, then the trend is really strong.
How much of that do you think is contributed to by the harmful algal blooms?
Yeah, certainly some of these, particularly that rust tide species, but also the Dinophysis tends to be one that grows along with other things. So it's a little bit, so definitely on the rust tide. On the Dinophysis, it tends to not be the only game in town. So yes, we just hit an all-time peak for Dinophysis, but it was probably less than 5% of the total algal biomass. It likes to come up along with everything else. So I would say that it's the nitrogen loading pushing the whole community and bringing some of these species along for the ride. Next slide. And again, we know that you get more. This is one of the first studies I did where I pulled up the nitrogen loading rates and to show that the chlorophyll levels trend with the amount of nitrogen going from land to sea. Next slide. Oxygen levels during the day, maybe a slight increase, not a very strong trend. Next slide. And now here's looking at some of the harmful algal bloom species. So the Alexandrium, again, it wasn't an all-time peak this year. That was actually the year prior, but you see the last 2 years significantly higher than prior years. Next slide. And then Dinophysis, this is something that, had not really been on the radar, would always be at very, very low levels. And now we see it popping up at higher levels over time. And, it's almost not quite a straight line up for 3 Mile Harbor, but again, it's a species that was sort of in the background and now becoming with time a little bit more prominent. Next slide. Next slide. Oh yeah, whereas the rust tide species looks like, if anything, it's getting a little bit less intense over time. Okay, so maybe we can just click through these. I'll tell you on the next one, and I'll just talk through it. Back one, yeah, perfect. Right, so I mean, one of the things that if you tie it all together, there's more fresh water going in, depressing the salinity, and probably leading to more nitrogen, which is leading to more algae, more of these harmful algal blooms. And that's why we have slightly higher levels of oxygen by day, but I'd argue probably at night it's going in the other direction. It's getting lower at night. But we don't have data. That's hypothesis. The ones in the dash lines are sort of filling in the blanks, whereas the ones in the solid lines are the data. Next slide. Okay, we did do some mapping with our HiCat for Napeague Harbor, and I'll just go through those. This is looking at high and low tide and temperature. Now the high tide monitoring in this particular date was in the morning. So I think the difference here is really just about through the day, it getting warmer and just getting surface heating. It's just heating up by a degree and a half. So I think that's how we explain this particular data set. Next slide. Here's salinity, which would show a pattern we'd expect, whereas the higher salinity by day, lower, at the high tide, lower at the low tide. And interestingly, I don't know what that little pond is in the southwest corner of Napeague there. I don't know what that's called.
That's where a fairly significant drain comes in from like that freshwater wetland system to the west.
Well, I mean, you can clearly, it's not a ridiculous amount of fresh water, but it's quite visible there. You can see it coming in and leading to lower salinity there.
And it's also where the diamondback terrapins hang out.
Okay, didn't know. Next slide. Here, not a lot of difference. It looks like levels of chlorophyll picking up by the end of the day. So maybe some of the algae that were in the within Napeague that maybe grew up during the day getting flushed out on the low tide. Next slide. And then dissolved oxygen, this to me really shows that day-night pattern, and then it's the lowest levels when we first went out by day, and then, the lowest levels in the morning when we first went out. And then through the day, probably with a lot of photosynthesis going on, those levels of oxygen rising. And similarly on the next slide, pH shows the same pattern. We have the lowest pH in the morning because there's been all the respiration, and then with photosynthesis during the day, it actually drives the pH up. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to change gears now a little bit and now talk about indicator bacteria, fecal bacteria. And just as a reminder, these show you the water bodies we're working within. And again, as I described before, they vary a lot, right? So like most of Napeague and 3 Mile are open to shellfishing. Northwest they're entirely closed, particularly in season. Hog Creek and Accabonac have these pockets that are open. So each one's a little bit different. Next slide. Okay, so this is fecal coliform bacteria. This is what the DEC uses as their proxy for deciding should a water body be open or closed. If you just give one more click. Essentially what this data set shows is that for Hog Creek, 3 Mile Harbor, and Northwest Creek, the patterns exactly match what the DEC has mapped. That is to say, if the DEC said it should be closed, our data showed, yeah, it's over. And they said it should be open, our data said, yeah, it's good. Couple of exceptions, however, for Napeague and Accabonac. So just go to the next slide. And particularly for these individual stations. So one more. Oh, just for context, I want to put this out there. This is rainfall for all of 2025, and if you do one more click, I just want to show, this is the rainfall during our sampling season primarily. And just to show it was both, on an average month, on Eastern Long Island, we should get about 4 inches of rain. So last summer, on average, we were below that. I pulled out the day-to-day, but actually there was, I think, a pretty good stretch from through a lot of August there was not a lot of rain. These dates are showing the average 15 days before and after. So I guess late June through July was the lowest, but on average, it was less runoff than usual, which could or should mean fewer bacteria. Next slide. But again, getting to Napeague. That high number in Napeague was driven largely by 2 samples. Technically, you'd want to be below 14. And so we did have, 4 samples that are above that. If you're going for the average, you want the average below 49, but you see a very, very high number driving the average. But then, 3 other dates that were also over, and this is again, this is the site on the eastern side of Napeague. And though even for the other site, there were at least, you can see 4 dates that were above that minimum number. And this is surprising. I think I'm going to show the long-term trend that points this out. And what's interesting is that last year, it was the E2 site that had more overages. But again, it was surprising last year. And what you'll see, I'll show the 10-year data. Napeague used to have almost undetectable levels of bacteria, but that's not been what we found just recently.
It's weird because you're not in the developed areas.
Yeah, well, yes, correct. But this could be, just because it's fecal bacteria, you don't have to think it's human bacteria. It could be, in some places we end up seeing it's just animals.
But where you see that one, there's that pretty significant, sort of wet plain behind the dunes there. And that is right about where that area drains out into Napeague.
Yeah, well, that might be one of the driver there. So
Could be a recent defecation.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
That's
of
right, and
course.
that's
I
why you
didn't
want to
wanna
have
say
an
that.
average. But again, we want the average below
Was it you?
49. This certainly drove it above.
Was it you?
So. And then for Napeague, I'm going to show more about Napeague, but I'll just say that it's the 7B site, which is the second most northern site there that's in the open area. And we did have 3 dates early on, June and through early July that were above that number. So that was the other stuff wasn't surprising, but there's some trends in Accabonac Harbor to point out. Next slide. So here's the 10-year trend. And again, firstly, note how low the levels were when we started the study. We hardly ever see any overages. Accabonac has really increased over time. And again, Napeague last year was, we had some pretty high numbers, and 3 Mile crept up a bit. And what's interesting, if we go to the next slide, I don't know when this happened, but I've compared so what you're looking at on the right is the current shellfishing open and closed designations by the DEC. On the left is a map that I used to present. I need to go back and find when I first had that map. But what you see are 4 locations. So in the uppermost location, you see an expansion both to the east and to the south of what it had been. And then you see the next one further down, that entire little pocket along Springs Fireplace Road, that whole cove now closed. You see the inlet to the Accabonac Harbor had been open to the east, and then now they have a pocket of, I can't even tell how many yards that says, 300 something. 350, thank you. Now closed, and or seasonally closed, blue is seasonally closed. So those 3 are seasonal closures. And then the furthest south, an expansion along Louse Point Road of the permanently closed areas. So clearly and again, I don't know when this happened.
It happened in the last, maybe, I'm going to say 6 or 8 years.
Yeah.
Well, I've been on the board.
Yeah. So it's consistent with the trends we've been seeing in there as well. So there's definitely, and again, if the salinity is going down and there's more runoff, that's going to lead to more bacteria here also. Okay, next slide. The other bacterial class we look at is Enterococcus. That's the standard for swimming. In general, the number is pretty good here. The violations for, say, Hog Creek and 3 Mile Harbor are the very, very back of these areas where you wouldn't expect it necessarily. But again, if we go to Napeague Harbor, the next slide, that same date that had high levels of fecal coliform bacteria, came along with it the high levels of Enterococcus. Thankfully, the only day of violation. So obviously there was something going on at that date in that location. Next slide. Just want to give, this is an FYI. Now, we didn't do any new microbial source tracking in 2025. But as a reminder, the assay had been separating these fecal bacteria from deer, birds, humans, and dogs. One more slide there. And this was our last year's results for Hog Creek, and you saw a mix of these different species. The one frustrating thing in the work we've done in the past is that the markers we have for dogs and small mammals were all in the same group. And that's sort of frustrating because, if it was a dog, the action might be different than if it were small mammals. And so if you go to the next slide, this is in Sag Harbor and mostly Southampton waters, but I just want to show you a new data set because we just developed a series of new primers for this assay. This is just like an FYI, thinking about things going forward. We have a new primer set for dogs, and this is what the EPA recommends. We have that up and working. New primer set for humans, and in this particular case, we had one for muskrat, and it was just sort of see what we find. So I'll just simply say that we can now, within the small mammals, separate out the dogs and a couple of other small mammals. And some interesting trends, it's not this data set here, but on the human side of things, this is in the harbor, and just pointing out, we've sort of seen this in East Hampton also. You can see with time, whether it's the Breakwater Club, Sag Harbor Yacht Club, Long Wharf, or even Windmill Beach, the human signal going down from summer into fall. This was done purposely to sample deep into the season. I know the numbers are a little muddled on the bottom there, but the last sample, at least for the last two, was in December. So it's August, September, October, December. But anyway, it was good in picking out that there was a stronger human signal in summer, presumably because it's a harbor associated with vessels. But anyway, we spent a lot of time over the winter developing these new primer sets. And so I think this assay has more strong, useful insights to impart now that we have more markers.
There's no very little dog, right?
Yes, that is somewhat surprising. Yeah. Next slide.
How did you have muskrat in that sample?
Well, there's two answers to that question. One, the muskrat, that's just the primer set that we developed and we pulled out just to see what we detect. And so we just worked up that additional assay. How the muskrat's gotten there, I guess was that the question, or?
I'm just wondering about, we know we have otters, river otters.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be considered the muskrat?
It might be picking up on them also.
Yeah, but you get two different, those two species have a completely different diet. River otters, they're carnivores. They're eating fish.
Right.
They're eating carrion, whatever. Muskrats are strict vegetarians.
So yeah, this is supposed to be muskrat. So
Yeah.
Have you isolated any other rodents?
There is an assay. What was there? There's one other assay that we're trying, and I can't remember if it's rat or mouse. I think it's rats. So.
They're different.
Yes. Yeah. And these assays are incredibly tricky because we try to pair them together, but sometimes you have to make sure that they can sit together in the analyses. But anyway, we now have it working well for the new human, the new dog, the bird, deer, and then the small mammals. Okay, I'm going to move on to freshwater bodies now. You can see the ones highlighted here. We'll go to the next slide. Just to show that not all the freshwater bodies are fresh. Certainly Georgia Pond is brackish. Fresh Pond, we know already, of course, it's called Fresh Pond, but is open and it has a more brackish salinity than all the other sites, but it's more marine than it is freshwater at this point. And then interestingly, Swan Pond it has some salinity to it as well. I'm not sure how that comes about. Next slide. Okay, these are chlorophyll levels measured for all these water bodies, and these are high. EPA has a very low standard for levels of chlorophyll they want to see. It's 8 micrograms per liter. Marine water bodies is 20. You can see all these sites go over the 8. They'd be considered, therefore, eutrophic water bodies, and some obviously very far beyond that. And we'll talk lots about Wainscott Pond. Next slide. Again, daytime oxygen levels, not that meaningful, although the fact that several of these come up low even during the day is a sign that these systems are quite eutrophic. Next slide. Yeah, there are those three. Oh yeah, and then I'll point out, Wainscott Pond looks perfect. Bear that in mind. Not only perfect, Wainscott Pond's higher than all the rest, so just bear that in mind, and we'll come back to that slide. So looking at the blue-green algae, of course, we worry about these. I think the next slide explains why. Because they can make toxins that can be harmful to humans. These are the two most common species that we see, and toxins that they may make. Next slide. And they're harmful to dogs as well as humans. Next slide. Okay. These are the levels of blue-green algae, and I have the dashed line in there for what is the DEC standard. And you know, a lot of these sites get dwarfed. One of these is Big Reed Pond, and I'm going to talk about Big Reed Pond after that. But you can see it's a one-time sampling, and it was a major event.
It's a shallow pond.
Yeah. And then obviously you can see Wainscott Pond, of course, having an event, as well as Swan Pond, Pond Lane. And if we just look at the maximum levels, Fort Pond had a short bloom and one day, in Georgia Pond for the maximum. So we look at that. Next slide. What's interesting, of course, this is interesting to me because it's kind of one of the things I study. All these systems have different blue-green algae or cyanobacteria in them. And so, you know, there's very little overlap. Even, you know, the two most similar are Pond Lane and Swan Pond, but even there, we are seeing differences. So, you know, I lump them together because they all can be harmful, but it's just important to recognize that the precise genera we find in each system is different. Next slide. Okay, I just want to, this is what Big Reed Pond looked like last September. And you know, it's sometimes called blue-green algae. Here, now you can see why. If you look at particularly the images on the right side there, you can literally see the blue, right? So that's like intense levels.
And you know what's wild? Is Reed Pond used to have, I don't know what, freshwater mussels or clams.
Okay.
That whole southwest side of Reed Pond, the bottom was just covered, and you don't see those things anymore.
Yeah, well, it's certainly, and the other thing that's wild is that if you looked at the watershed, it's pretty pristine all around there. So it's probably just filling in over time and becoming, therefore, as you said, super shallow. And anytime you get a shallow, warm water body, it can be vulnerable to these things.
How deep is that in the middle here?
Deepest it gets is about 7 foot.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Next slide. I'm gonna now move to some of the, I'm gonna look at Pond Lane and Swan Pond together and just gonna compare over time how things have changed. So 2023 sampling, we had 1 day over the limit for this Pond Lane pond. Next slide. And now you can see things different, right? The bloom ramping up over time. Now we had more than a full month that was almost 2 months, July and August. Continually above that standard. So a change. And remember, these are systems that were off of certainly my radar up until, you know, I think 5 years ago when somebody said, so can you look at this water? It looks a little green. And so things are changing with time. Next. Now Swan Pond, again, 2023, started out with a couple of dates with a bloom and then just went away. We go to 2025. And this was pretty consistent, right? Things hung on from June all the way into October, you know, 1 date that was below in September. So, you know, these systems, the blooms seem to be intensifying with time. Next slide. I mentioned that there's actually differences across these two, despite the fact that they're like a stone's throw away. These are the levels of microcystin, toxin of concern, and what's of interest is that, you know, the levels in Pond Lane are almost an order of magnitude higher than what you see right next to it in Swan Pond. And again, I attribute this to different blue-green algae or cyanobacteria in the different systems, and probably a larger component of just one genera, I think microcystis, that makes this compound microcystin. Next slide. Gonna pivot now to Wainscott Pond, and in happy news, I think I end on this. So we're almost at the end, although we've got a rich data set for Wainscott for the 2025. Next slide. Okay, yeah, so some visual evidence of what's happening in Wainscott Pond. This is a northern extent in July. Next slide. Again, I'm going to just give you the time frame. So again, Wainscott Pond was off my radar prior to, I think, 2016 or 17. Somebody said you should look at this. We began sampling, and I think this was the first year we had a full year. And so what you see is a bloom develops in July, and by August, it's pretty much gone. This is like weekly sampling. Got pretty intense, but just for 2 weeks, and not a lot to speak of thereafter. Next slide. Now, here's not 2025, but 2023. So again, we went from having like a month of a bloom to now it's really the whole entire year, April into December, and at least a little mild in through June, and then things getting more intense through July. Look at 2025, and it's like at 11 for the whole season. I don't have the full data set in here, but I literally had a student breaking through the ice to sample this in late December into January. There was still some blue-green algae there, levels much lower, but you see like November and December getting at these very high levels. I think some of the highest we've seen. So very, very clearly this is a system that in a short period of time has really transformed for the worse, frankly. Next slide. And this it's just comparing what's happened with Wainscott compared to Georgia Pond over that same time period. Next slide. Now, there is some happy news. The levels of microcystin in Wainscott Pond used to be over 100. Now it's less than 1. Right, they put up there the drinking water standard. It hit that standard once through the whole season. So again, the makeup of the cyanobacteria has changed over time. So it's not only is it more intense, but in happy news, at least with regard to this toxin, less toxic.
Now, Chris, could some of this trending, because the last time that pond got washed over from the ocean was sandy.
Absolutely, yeah, that's exactly
So are we seeing a dynamic that's basically maybe even returning back to what it was before that washover?
Possibly, but I'm gonna show some depth data. So I'm gonna think about that, and let's both think about that, and let's talk. After the depth data, let's think about the washover and the effect. Next slide. Okay, but we actually did find a second toxin in Wainscott Pond, something called anatoxin A, which is a neurotoxin. Now, we want the happy news, the levels weren't that high, but significantly beyond our detection limits. And it looks like, again, it was a species that was like maybe the third most abundant that came up in the fall and was gone by December. So again, it's what's in the mix sometimes that can be important for leading to these toxins, and hopefully this is the all-time peak. But again, what we've seen over time, sometimes these toxin levels can be very high and then go to low, and it all depends who's winning the battle amongst all these cyanobacteria in the system. Next slide. Okay, so we did a deep dive on Wainscott because we've seen these trends coming up. So I have more data to share. We had continuous monitoring. This is just showing the temperatures. And again, look at those temperatures. It was getting down close to 0. It was like 1 degree, and we still, remember the blooms are ramping up in December. So whatever's out there, there's the species dominating. There's a species for all seasons, essentially. And it's not the same one, but it just keeps going through the seasons. Next slide. Here, this is a perfect illustration. Remember, I showed you that Wainscott Pond had the highest oxygen levels of all the freshwater systems. In fact, the next slide illustrates this even better. So there's the day by day, measuring the numbers by day. The axes, it slipped a little bit, but they both go from 0 to 18. So you see, you measure during the day, everything looks perfect. But in fact, what happens is you do get these excursions to very low levels at night. Next slide. pH is the same thing, the levels, and in fact, these are wild swings. pH is a log scale. So what you're looking at here is in one day, a 3 order of magnitude change in the pH. Photosynthesis driving the pH way up by day, respiration plummeting at night.
It's like no buffer capacity at all.
Exactly, that's exactly right. Who knew Jim Grimes had the command of carbonate chemistry? Okay, very good. Next slide. And then this is just the sensor. So just this, all of this is a continuous sensor that's hanging in the pond, and this just mimics almost exactly what we saw through the seasons. It got more intense as we went from the spring to summer, and then into fall. Next slide. Okay, we also did some mapping of the system. This was later in the season, and what's interesting is that well, it looks like obviously warmer in the shallow area to the north, and that little cool patch. I think that comes up again.
Is that a deep area?
I'm not sure if it's deep. Well, actually, no, it's not a deep area,
Okay.
and we'll see that going forward. Next slide. Looks like just a hint of slightly lower salinity coming in there. If you squint your eyes, it maybe looks like there's some connectivity between the field and the pond there. Not sure, but it could have been right after a rainfall event. Also,
Got the irrigation and just the slope of the land.
I think it's possible.
Yeah, this is kind of a stretch, but
It's not I will say that it's not a huge, recognize on the salinity front, it's a 0.1 unit or 0.01 unit difference. So it's not very big, but detectable because the rest of it was so similar. Next slide. In this case, it looks like maybe the chlorophyll being pushed down to the lower extent. So certainly worse in the lower end of the pond than the north. Next slide. And here the pH, along with what we'd expect with the algae being higher to the south, higher pH there.
Excuse me 1 second. This is LTV. I just want to let viewers know that I am aware that we lost some audio with the channel, but we are still recording and we are still streaming. Just want to make it known. Thank you.
Okay.
Let's see what you
Perhaps I'm doing pantomime now. Just. But anyway, the pH also following what the algae are doing. I think the next one is the oxygen, and also the same general pattern, higher to the south where there's probably more photosynthetic activity. Next slide. Okay, this is very interesting. This is depth, just 7-year comparison, and one, just by eye, you can see that it was a lot deeper in 2018 compared to what we saw in 2025. And that's just 7 years. But what's also interesting is that if you look at the scale, it's even more dramatic. The maximum depth we were seeing in 2025, 1.25 meters, 2018, 1.73. So, this thing seems to be filling in. And this is actually the original definition of eutrophication, is a fresh water body over time just filling in, right? And so it looks pretty accelerated here. But when you get a lot of productivity, all these years in the past, again, these are the highest levels of algae we're seeing in any system. At the end of the season, like when the ice finally hit, we did see the levels drop, and it's all just going to the bottom. So, but it's definitely getting shallower.
Chris, if I know you did sediment sampling.
Yes, that's next.
Got on a while ago.
Well, actually, next slide is the.
Okay, I'll wait.
Okay.
And before you get to that next slide, just one more update. I just got the audio up and running. Everything is good. Please keep going. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Welcome back, everybody. Okay, so this is the organic matter content at the bottom of the pond, and the purple are the lowest levels, but anything that I would say is like even blue through red. So purple is low. Everything that's blue through red is high, right? And like some of these numbers are like really, really high. So this is like super thick mud. You can see where the bullseye is for it. But even the area that's green and even the blue, to me, is a level that shows you that it's pretty thick.
So the clay content you have in that sediment.
Well, that would, okay, what, do you have my slide deck? Like, yeah, let's see the next one.
No, but it's just a logical question,
All right, there it is. Here's,
because the clay is,
who's the guy in Johnny Carson? who would-
clay is your phosphorus thing, sink.
Okay, well, there it is. It matches up. The areas that had high organic matter are also high in silt and clay. And you can see, I mean, that the same clustering and then along the middle, but particularly to the north, it's mainly this fine, this silt and clay. And what you want is a lot of sands, but instead it's this compacted silt and clay, and yeah, a source of phosphorus for sure. Okay, next slide. Okay, and then the last thing is I'm ending on some happy news. I've been witnessing Wainscott Pond, like I said, since 2018, and it's just, that's been in the wrong direction. Now, in happy news, the town obtained a lot of land along the northern extent there, and with permission from the town and in collaboration with the Center for Clean Water Technology, we started measuring the levels of nitrogen in the groundwater to this northern extent, trying to get a sense of how much nitrogen is going in and can we do something about it. So here's these numbers. Each green box is a layer of groundwater, 10 to 15, 20 to 25, 35 to 40 of nitrating groundwater. Bottom line is all these levels are very high. And so we worked with an engineer, next slide, and we put in a proposal to the town to put in a reactive barrier to intercept the high nitrogen groundwater coming in along that northern extent. So we just put this in February 15th-ish. So it's under consideration by the town. And again, John was able to put a letter together in support of this. The town gave us permission to work there. So it's a very nice collaboration. One more slide. And we're working with a firm out of Massachusetts, Isotech, a guy named Paul Dombrowski, a very smart engineer who's done a lot of work on reactive barriers. And you can see here the proposal. We looked at the groundwater flow. We were actually off the mark. We had all those wells on the eastern side of the pond, only to discover that all that groundwater is just headed out towards towards Georgia. But this is the area that is coming straight on in. So that made our lives simpler to put in a barrier there. So I hope this gets to go through because I think it would be a good project. There's more to do than this, but this I think be a great start. Okay, so done. Conclusions is the last slide. So I showed you the trends: increasing temperature, chlorophyll, and oxygen, decreasing salinity. Chlorophyll trends were the strongest. It's near record, very high dense blooms and Alexander Danophysis in 2025. Half of the sites with nitrogen levels above the PEP standard. Volcanic Estuary Program partnership now. Again, a couple of occurrences of fecal contamination in Napeague Harbor. Second year in a row we were seeing that. High levels of algae in a lot of the ponds, blue-green algal blooms in Wainscott, Swan Pond, Pond Lane, Fort Pond, Georgia, and Big Reed Pond. And with Wainscott, Swan Pond, and Pond Lane showing the troubling trends, including for Wainscott getting shallower than this new toxin, and hopefully the PRB will move things in the right direction. So with that, I'm done. Hopefully that wasn't too long. And I thank you guys all.
Oh, hey, thanks, Chris.
Thank you. You guys have been great.
I can see two projects on Wainscott Pond.
Okay.
You're starting with the permeable PRB,
Yep.
but using really a high, now that the town owns the land to the east, is basically doing an environmental hydraulic dredging project to vacuum up those sediments.
Yeah.
You could distribute them in the field
Yeah.
to the east. And given the fact that you've established that the flow is towards Georgia Pond, in the future, Georgia Pond's capable of of taking that nitrogen in much better than Wainscott Pond.
Certainly bigger. I don't know if we want the nitrogen diverting
Well,
it.
listen, it's gonna go somewhere and you gotta recognize
yeah,
it,
yeah.
but,
Dredging is always, a positive. You're gonna get, you're literally de-aging the water body by doing that. The one tricky thing is that there is a lot of land there, but there's also a lot of sediment. So you have to calculate out how deep you want to go down, and then you'd have to figure out how high the sediment's
like
gonna be
top,
piled up.
it's the same as top dress in a golf course stream.
Yeah.
Would there be a,
Something
would there be a good plant to put there?
Well, what's that?
I mean, where you put the phosphorus?
Well, what happens
Area
is the
for that.
phosphorus binds to those clay particles, and it's one of those recycling nutrients.
Yeah.
It just keeps coming back through the system.
Yeah.
It helps drive the blue-green algae.
Would there be any
Um,
would there be any plants where you put the soil that might break it down more?
Yeah, listen, if you calculated the square footage of your air dump site, call it, what are you gonna cut? What are you gonna put down? You're not gonna wanna put it down any more than about a half an inch of material over the field without it impacting the growth of the plants in the field.
It's gonna leave the
But
existing
by doing
plant.
it, you're gonna enhance the growth of the plants in the field. There's a lot of warm season grasses there. So they're gonna tend to capture those
Yeah,
nutrients
it's gonna,
farther down into the soil
Interesting
column.
idea. And you could, if you did it, typically when people do dredge projects, it's an all at once. So, hey, we're gonna go down 5 feet and we're gonna,
You're gonna
but-
vacuum the bottom like you're cleaning your
Yeah, but if
fish
you
pond.
did like a little bit each year and supplemented that, it might also help the, some of the vegetation against, it's an interesting idea.
Maybe that's something that we could work on with Chris, and there's gonna be it's gotta be a lot of coordination, collaboration with the town since they own all the land.
No, but I think it's a nice, it would be a very nice, if they're doing the PRB and you set up something, if there's an association similar to what you have with Friends of Georgia, they could spearhead something like that, or the trustees. That would be, I think, a great project. So
I could do some back of the envelope
Yeah.
and get a sense of what might be
because the
feasible.
good news is it's not a huge pond.
Right, yep.
there's a lot of land around there.
I know the town had considered, leasing it out.
The phosphorus the phosphorus might be actually
I
beneficial.
don't think, can I tell you what, that is not a field that you would ever want to till. You'd aggravate the issues that you're having in there
I
now.
think that was part of the discussion. that they
Yeah.
had.
Yeah.
I know agriculture was, part of the discussion also.
Thank you.
Sorry,
You're welcome.
I had a question. Some of the ponds are very small, like Swan Pond and
Yeah.
the other pond. Are they more reactive, shall we say, to rainfall and temperature?
Yeah, for sure. And nutrient loading and infilling, right? Because the volume was so small, they warm up faster, they're more susceptible to pollutants. They like I said, fill in faster, and that gives them more nutrients. And as per what Jim was sort of saying, these systems, they kind of can go like we're seeing. I think all the commonality between those three, Wainscott, Swan Pond, and Pond Lane, they're all small and shallow. And they're all going in the same kind of direction. There's a big algal bloom. The algal bloom is filled with nitrogen, phosphorus. It all goes through the sediment, and then it heats up, and then the sediment shoots all the nitrogen, phosphorus back up to the surface. So it's sort of this, continuing. And I've noted this a bit of a warming trend. These blue algae like it warmer, so falls have been warmer. They're lasting longer into the season. So it does end up being a little bit of a, they can start intensifying with sort of positive feedback. So.
Because some of the photos that we were shown have a lot of Phragmites around those ponds.
Yeah, for sure. And that makes them shallower as well. The Phragmites grows in, the roots grow in, and it makes it shallower. I think more susceptible to warming, and then more susceptible to these algal blooms.
Interesting. So like Wainscott Pond, is that relatively speaking one of the larger ponds as far as volume of water?
Well, I mean, larger than Pond Lane and Swan Pond, but, not as big as, say, Hook Pond, not as big as Georgia, which is sort of really a brackish system, but yeah.
Because I think the stormwater runoff, when you are on the street there near Swan Pond, I've never been actually to that pond, but you see the lay of the land, like it's, all the water's coming that way.
Yeah.
And
A lot of street drainage is directed right into Pond Lane Pond.
Yeah, and that certainly isn't going to help either. I mean, it's sending nutrients, but also probably a lot of sediment that's filling it in, and depth helps because it keeps it cooler and less vulnerable to pollution. So, yeah. So all these things acting, and they're pushing it in the same direction: the Phragmites, the runoff, the warming, the reoccurrence. Yeah.
tricky one.
Okay.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks so much.
Looking forward to discussing what we want to do for 2026. Let me know.
We got a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Matt, do we have anybody on the phone lines?
If you can just stand by 1 second, let me double check the phone lines, make sure they're all clear. Hang on, please.
You have some on Zoom, Francis, that I can.
Just wanted to know.
And hello, this is Matt Chapman calling from LTV, making sure all lines are good, which they are, and you have 0 callers. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We'll move on to Georgia Capon, a request made by Land Use Ecological Services on behalf of the Friends of Georgia Capon to renew the aquatic weed harvester permit.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Will Bowman from Land Use Ecological Services. Can y'all hear me okay?
We do.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a good segue. A couple points from Chris's presentation regarding the nutrients and in the East Hampton waterways and specifically Georgia Pond. The Friends of Georgia Pond's use of the aquatic weed harvester to selectively remove aquatic plants and algae biomass was last reviewed by and approved by the trustees in 2023. At that time, the trustees approved harvester use under Resolution 202330 and extended the duration of the harvester approval for 3 years until 2026 to align with the expiration of the project's NYSDEC permit. So here we are in 2026 seeking reauthorization. So the aquatic plant harvester has been utilized in Georgia Pond by the Friends of Georgia in conjunction with the East Hampton Trustees and the Gobler Lab and Stony Brook University. That harvester has been used most summers between 2016 and 2025. So the Friends is seeking authorization to continue annual aquatic harvesting for a 5-year period commencing this coming year in 2026. The impetus for the harvester use was significant water quality impairments in Georgia Pond, which were discussed in past Gobler presentations about the state of the East Hampton's waterways, but particularly in 2014 and 2015, and included those harmful blue-green algae blooms, the elevated level of associated cyanotoxins, anoxia, and depleted oxygen concentrations in Georgia waterways, and potential for fish kills. In response to those impairments, 2014, 2015, the Friends of Georgia Pond, in conjunction with the trustees and the Gobler Lab, utilized an aquatic weed harvester as an experimental nutrient reduction strategy. Chris and Stoney identified that harmful blue-green algae blooms in Georgia were fueled in part by the release of nitrogen and phosphorus from decomposing aquatic plant biomass and macroalgae biomass. Therefore, proactive removal of some of that aquatic plant and macroalgae biomass could reduce the nutrients available to fuel those late season harmful algae blooms. The group implemented a pilot project for the harvester between 2016 and 2018. Due to the success of the harvester at that time, harvester use was continued. Applications were made to the trustees, the town, NYSDEC, to continue the use of the harvester. Those permits were granted in 2021-ish, and then the approval, the harvester has been used since up until 2025. Between 2016 and 2018, between 30,000 and approximately 95,000 pounds of aquatic plant biomass were removed annually. However, since those early years, harvester use and total plant biomass has declined over time. Just this past year, in 2025, only 12,250 pounds of aquatic plant biomass were removed, and almost no aquatic plant biomass was removed in the preceding 2 years of 2023 and 2024. It's expected that the need for the use of the harvester will continue to decline. However, Friends of Georgica Pond would like to continue the capability of using the harvester to address excessive dense stands of aquatic plants and macroalgae should they arise, and decrease the potential for these harmful algae blooms and anoxia events in the late summer months. The methodology for any future harvest would be consistent with that used since 2016. So the harvesting occurs in the months of June, July, August, and September, and is completed using a about 35-foot long aquatic weed harvester vessel. The vessel has traditionally operated for 7.5 hours per day, 5 days a week. And that would, and the future harvest would be consistent with those past trustees' resolutions. The harvester has been launched at the end of Cove Hollow Road, that kind of a disturbed area at the road ending, and the vessel then proceeds out into the pond, focusing on the coves and tributaries. It cuts aquatic vegetation up to a depth of about 1 foot below the water level to minimize disturbance to benthic communities and maintain aquatic plant cover. Vegetation can continue to grow and towards the water surface, and if necessary, can be cut again in 10 to 14 days. That harvester cuts the plant biomass, has a conveyor belt that loads it onto the back of the vessel. When the harvester is filled with vegetation, it's brought back to Cove Hollow Road, where the biomass is loaded onto that shoreline, loaded onto a truck, and delivered to the town transfer station for weighing and composting. Similar to past harvester use, the following several best management practices would be employed to minimize potential environmental impacts for any future harvester use. the launching and unloading would only occur at disturbed designated places in Georgia Pond. That's traditionally been the end of Cove Hollow Road, but this application also has the possibility of doing it at the Route 27 rest area site as well. The harvester has a bar on its bottom that prevents it from cutting more than a foot below the surface or disturbing the substrate. Traditionally, the harvester operator has approached stands of aquatic vegetation at a slow speed. It's been found that through extensive reviews of bycatch that slow approach reduces bycatch of fish. So that's how the harvester is typically operated. And then the harvester can be stopped if any large animals like snapping turtles or large eels or large fish are captured. The harvester can be stopped and those animals by hand drop back in the water. Very importantly, the extensive biological and water quality monitoring conducted by the Gobler and Peterson labs at Stony Brook would be continued in conjunction with the harvester program. That has included data collection on the aquatic vegetation and macroalgae composition within the pond, Chris's extensive water quality monitoring, and then also monitoring of the finfish, blue crab, and invertebrate communities throughout the pond, which have been integral into kind of understanding, how the biological communities of Georgia Pond are doing. And of course, continued annual submission of those annual reports to the trustees and the DEC. So I just wanted to kind of give a very, very quick run through of how the harvester is typically operated. And I know the board has a long agenda tonight. So again, the Friends are seeking authorization to continue potential for annual harvesting for a 5-year period. And I'd be happy to address any questions that the board may have.
This project has worked very well.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions?
Well, I don't have any questions because I've been involved in this through the whole time. I'm good.
Questions?
In fact, I'd like to make a motion that we agree to continue to approve this.
I second.
All in favor?
Well, thank you.
Anyone opposed? Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for your time, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we'll go to a request from Seacoast Enterprises Associates for a 10-year maintenance permit for 3 Mile Harbor Marina, 6 Boatyard Road, Suffolk County Tax Map 300-120-1-2, 3, and 10. And to close out trustee permits T224 and T324.
Good evening, trustees. Mark Mendelman, Seacoast Enterprises Associates with 3 Mile Harbor Marina. So similar to the 10-year maintenance permit that we have in place at Harbor Marina, we put in the application for a 10-year maintenance permit for 3 Mile Harbor Marina. And I'm here to answer any questions about that application. It's basically repair and maintenance to bulkheads, maintenance dredging 10 foot seaward of the bulkhead, and repairing any pilings that might break or repairing any docks and replacing boards, etc. We had a couple of other permits open for additional finger piers at the marina that were okay. Now closing those out, we're finished with that work. So we want to just have a simple permit set with the trustees for doing all the maintenance that we need to do for the next 10 years. In conjunction with the trustees maintenance permit, there's a
New York State DEC general permit that exists to repair and replace bulkheads with associated maintenance dredging as well. Any of the repairs to pilings, docks, et cetera, from a DEC perspective, is no permit necessary for lawfully existing structures, which we fall under. So the trustees are a little bit more comprehensive in terms of what you require a permit to do maintenance-wise. But that said, the DEC request for authorization under that general permit has been sent out to the DEC as of today. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
That general permit is, what's the time period on that? Is there any? Yeah.
I requested a 10-year request for authorization. In the request, your project start or construction start date, construction expected end date, I made that 10 years. So we'll see what they say.
The only question I had for Mark and the board is, when you replace decking, you're using boards, right? You're using Greenheart or
either IPA or we use Kebony, which is like a untreated hardwood. We've used what's called wear deck, which is like a composite, but generally untreated.
do you ever use grading when you're doing
We have not.
open grading?
We have not used open grading.
I believe the DEC prefers that for, use in new construction and replacements, docks.
John, usually DEC's asking for the flow-through decking on gangways and things like that, because the material only comes in a 3 and 4 foot width. Okay, so it's not really applicable generally for like a commercial dock. And that's why you don't see it.
What are the widths of your docks? The finger piers are fairly narrow.
Finger piers are 2 foot and where they attach to the dock, they're 6 foot. The main piers at 3 Mile, I think, are 8'6" wide, and the finger piers, some are around 3.5, 4 foot wide. Plastic. In those cases, it's a super deck. Some of those where you have a plastic flotation, a plastic piece that bolts to the flotation, and that's what makes your dock. Other times we use jet floats, which are a modular docking system, like high density polyethylene, no decking associated with the jet float.
My understanding of the interest in using this material was so it let light through, or at least part of the interest. I don't know how much this would apply in a marina situation, which is kind of dredged and unlikely to.
And you also have all of the utilities underneath all the decking and everything else. So
John, usually those flow-through dock materials are not so much associated with the docks as they are like gangways, boardwalks.
Catwalks over
because there you're trying to get the light transmission to the plants underneath the docks.
Yeah. I make a motion to.
You know what, I'd make a motion, Bill, go ahead and make the motion. I was planning on making the motion to align it with whatever you ultimately get with the DEC permit.
Sure.
So the two would D-Day at the same time.
That makes sense.
So I'll second it.
So that's a joint motion?
So I'll second your motion.
Whatever.
Can someone make the motion?
We have to have 2 votes here, please.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay.
Yeah, Bill made the motion, Jim modified and seconded it.
Yes, thank you. That's super helpful. There's another agenda item.
Right.
Right after this.
You want to do a 2025 summary of work completed and work plan for 2026.
So one of the conditions of the 10-year maintenance permit at Harbor Marina is that we come back to the board every year and say what we've done and what we intend to do in the coming year. Minor stuff at Harbor Marina, we fixed up some of the floating docks, some cleats, and replaced a broken piling or two. This spring, we will replace at least one piling that has broken. Haven't lost anything to the ice, which is a great thing. And potentially when the window opens in October, the dredging window opens in October, we are experiencing a lot of shoaling in between, and I don't know if you can, I sent this over via PDF.
Oh, when did you send? Oh, earlier today? No, I didn't know you wanted me to have it. I don't have that today.
Okay, it's essentially, there's Sedge Island is west of our fuel dock at Harbor Marina, and Sedge Island is bulkheaded. The bulkhead was replaced in 2018, something like that. And sorry, a portion of the bulkhead was replaced in 2018. And we dredged at that time and put the material up on Sedge Island. We're experiencing a lot of shoaling again in between the fuel dock and the B dock and Sedge Island, to the point where some of the larger boats that depend on coming in there for their transport back and forth all season long are concerned that they're going to run aground at low tide. So we'd like to perform maintenance dredging in front of that bulkhead, 10 foot out in front of the bulkhead.
Do you have a general permit for that from the DEC?
We actually have a 10-year maintenance permit with the DEC that expired in April of 2025. And we are applying for the general permit as well for Harbor Marina. So we've submitted all that information for both 3 Mile Harbor Marina. It's not a lot of information, but
So you're applying,
Marina and Harbor Marina.
you're applying for another 10-year permit with the DEC?
We're applying for coverage under the general permit now,
Okay.
because it's
So it's a longer duration?
the general permit was put in place for this specific reason, so that we wouldn't have to go to the DEC for
Each and every event.
each and every event.
You'll need an NRSP for this dredging?
We have an NRSP for Harbor Marina. I have submitted the extension of time request as of December of last year, so that's in the portal. And by my understanding, a building permit is not required for a dredging specific project.
That makes sense.
So I think this fits under our 10-year maintenance permit. This projected work for.
And of course, as soon as we're ready to actually start the work, we will notice the trustees, the DEC, and all the other involved agencies.
Make a motion that we basically apply the same language to the last permit, just align it
A second.
with your DEC.
No, he's just doing a report on
I'm
it.
just reporting out on
Oh,
it.
shit.
It's an
I'm
annual
sorry.
report.
So we're good to go. If there's
I
any,
thought you were asking for something.
nope.
No, he's just.
You're always
letting you know.
asking for something.
I would like to have better news from Dr. Gobler maybe next year. That would be what I'm.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just found it. So you don't need it.
All right. Is Barley on?
I don't know, is somebody on the phone or
He's
the
not on the phone.
Zoom?
Barley's on Zoom.
I'm on Zoom.
Hey, Barley, we'll do
Hi.
you next. Winter impacts on agricultural gear, John Barley Dunn.
All right. Good evening. Patrice reached out last week and asked me to talk about the issue that's been getting a lot of media lately, and that's the effect of the ice on aquaculture gear. So better to get the word out to East Hampton as well that, and this is in regard to the commercial farms and the Peconics basically, despite today's beautiful weather, we were coming out of a hell of a winter and basically everything froze up. So any farmers that left gears floating sustained some damages. And that stuff that was ripped out of their farm from the ice is now working its way, washing up on beaches. So anybody who spends time walking the bay beaches might find oyster gear, and the Long Island oyster growers are basically asking for folks to report that by taking a picture, noting the location, and sending an email to info@leogany.org. Allison, did you get my PowerPoint slide to throw up there? Just so you can see exactly how it's spelled. And just also important to note that it's, it was a rough winter, and it's not just oyster farm gear that's washing up. There's bulkhead material, dock material, boat material, mooring area material, so all kinds of stuff washing up, but the oyster growers are actively trying to recover all that gear in an effort to be good stewards. So we're just trying to get the word out to, like I said, take photos, note a location, and send an email to info@leogany.org. That's spelled LIOGANY.org. I think Allison's putting that up. Yeah, there we go. And typically this stuff is going to consist of a black float attached to either a metal mesh cage or a plastic mesh cage. There could be mesh oyster bags inside the cage, and in best case scenario, it could include an orange tag that'll have something that looks sort of like this. That'll have the farm name and hopefully a phone number on it, so folks can actually call the farmer directly. So that's basically the message, just to get the word out. Our gear didn't really sustain any damage because we pull everything, and the oyster gardens are all sunk. Nappy Garden was dragged a little bit, and we're actually going to go recover that tomorrow, but everything stayed pretty close by.
So the DEC sent out an email today, actually, about this subject, and they gave the email address that you mentioned. It's pretty clear what they're expecting. So we can put this on our website or that on your website, whichever.
That'd be great. Yeah, that'd be a big help.
I think it's important that people know that when they see this stuff, to get it back to the owners and not just walk by it.
Yeah, they want it back. Nobody wants to litter the beach. They want it back. And not one other thing, if it's at all applicable, if folks could drag it up, lightweight stuff, maybe just drag it up above the high tide line so it doesn't get sucked back out into the water. But as you all know, stuff covers a lot of ground. So there's stuff really from inside the Peconics, and I'm assuming it's gone as far as Gardeners. So hopefully all that stuff gets recovered.
Thanks, Barley.
Okay. Thank you,
Thank you,
Barley.
Barley.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we have an inquiry from Brody Eggert of Eastern Long Island Surfrider Foundation regarding beach grass plantings.
Yeah, this actually was an inquiry that came to David Cataletto from Brody Eggert. David couldn't be here. He asked me, and then David asked me, and I figured I'd just bring it to the board because the board might be a little more familiar with beach grass plantings than I am. So let me just read his email, Brody Eggert's email. I hope you're doing well. We're beginning to explore a potential, well, let me just begin. Brody Eggert is with Surfrider, Eastern Long Island chapter manager for Surfrider. So we're beginning to explore a potential spring dune grass planting for our volunteer networks in partnership with Group for the East End. And I wanted to reach out to you first to better understand the proper coordination process on East Hampton town beaches. Since the trustees manage town beaches and waters, would a dune grass planting effort fall under trustee jurisdiction, or is it typically coordinated through town natural resources? Additionally, if this is something trustees review, could you advise us on any permits or approvals that would typically be required? Timeline considerations for spring planting, whether there are specific beach areas the trustees have identified as needing supplemental dune planting. He's especially curious about the new beach and ditch plains, which may or may not be there.
It's nothing to do with this. We do actually, John, we do have a beach that they could really be nice if they wanted to do beach planting. We've got to grade that dune that we looked at in their baby beach.
Yeah, that's what I was.
That'd be a great spot. Other than that, this guy seems to be out to lunch as far as what's trustee and what's town.
Give you a little nicer, soft, nice gesture. That's
We're in favor of planting beach grass, no matter where it is.
And we do that ourselves?
What's that?
Do we need to direct him to any town permit?
No, I don't think, no, there's no town permit needed for our beach. And I would just basically keep it in-house. Here's a project. That's a trustee beach. Ditch plains and all that other stuff, that's not us.
And when would be the ideal?
Actually, probably this month to early April. That early April is gonna be the latest. We're a little late in the game coming to this, but there's time.
Okay, I'll pass this on. See if we can get something going with these guys.
So generally, when they said the dune, in the letter, they said plant the beach grass in the dune, right? Isn't that the homeowner's property, not ours?
Yes, yes, depends on where you are, because like in the case of, I'm gonna use it as an example. They're doing the dredging in Georgia Pond right now. That sand that's been dredged is gonna be used to cover the revetments at the Rayner property and some of the properties west. Their property ends at the edge of the beach grass line. So yes, it very much is a homeowner thing. I think it's a good gesture, but I think in some cases, they're a little naive as to what is.
Because when we look at this, the sand fences, right, the sand fences, that's where kind of like where our line is.
Yeah.
And.
Yeah. But it's a good gesture. I don't want to discourage it.
As Jim said, the baby beach area is the perfect area because it's all our beach.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there are places along the ocean where the beach grass line is considered the property line.
Right.
It's placed here artificially, so be careful that way.
And in David's email to me about this, he says he's interested in, bringing some of his community service clubs of the school into this.
Yeah, no, that would be a really good place because it's very accessible. Yeah,
But they're gonna have to move quickly.
but they're going to need to move quickly within the next 3 weeks.
Okay, I'll pass this on to David.
All right, move on to, well, I'm not sure why this is old business, but New York State DEC reviews safety protocol and reporting suspected highly pathogenic avian flu, HPAI, or infected birds and carcasses. Jim, you seem to be our expert.
I would honestly say that ship sailed. Okay, as you're all aware, there was considerable bird die-off in Georgia Pond specifically, but it appears we got some other areas, but we don't have them.
There are other areas all over Long Island.
Yeah, but in any case, Francis reached out to the town, I reached out to the DEC, Kim Quarty reached out to USDA. DEC was very upfront in saying that it is most likely avian flu. If you want a confirmation on that, triple bag some sample birds, bring them to our office and we'll test them. But no, we are not coming out to collect birds. Okay, with that information, Francis, John, and I had a discussion. Last Wednesday, I went out and basically spent the day picking up dead geese out of Georgia. Picked up 230 birds that day. I felt like I had put my trustee share of work in. I called Francis on Thursday and made an offer that I could have my company do it on Friday, because you know what's happening is the rapidly rising temperatures by today, those birds were going to basically be deteriorating. They were starting to rot and stink. So we went down there, and at the end of Friday, we had collected, between Wednesday and Friday, we collected 738 birds. I went down, we had a name for this operation, by the way. It was called Feathered Fury. And oddly enough, there was Tim Miller, who works for Georgia Association using AI, put together a nice little logo and everything. I was impressed. My name's on the phone. It was really, but in any case, I went in there today. There are more birds. That's the bad news. The good news is maybe there's about 75 to 80 birds. So the incidence is falling off. There still are some sick birds. There is a little bit of a silver lining here in that, yes, we've come across some common mergansers, we've come across a few broadbill, we've come across a few bufflehead, a dead swan, a dead seagull, and one dead cormorant. But you know what's nice? What we didn't come across, luckily, and this was, I'm really glad to see this, because the eagles had basically been scavenging these carcasses out on the ice for the last few weeks. We haven't seen any dead eagles, but we also haven't seen any dead puddle ducks. Mallards, black ducks, canvasbacks, and the like. They are present in Georgia Pond. So knock on wood, that hasn't been an issue. It is a pretty heavy hit on the goose population, but you know, the goose population is pretty darn resilient. A lot of these birds are resident. I'd like to thank Billy Babinski's two kids, because they went out and collected up any bands off of birds. You know, and I saw that in the one-legged geese I came across while we were picking up geese. And what's important is the states want to retain that data from those birds. So they collected about a dozen bands last I checked. They were from, I think they had one from Maine. They had some from Massachusetts, some from Rhode Island. No New York birds. But, you know, it kind of gives you an idea where these birds were reared, where they came from, because these birds are typically banded as juveniles. So that's the long and short of it. Francis had gone down and Allison had put together some signs in both English and Spanish, warning of the dangers of handling these birds, and that we put them down at end of Beach Lane. They put them over at Georgia, and where else did you put them, Francis?
Louse Point.
Louse Point, to warn the public about these things. There is a low incidence of transferring of bird flu to humans and pets, but it has occurred. So, you know, in our efforts, we've taken great care in doing this as safely as possible.
Gloves and masks.
Wearing masks, wearing Tyvek suits, rubber boots, rubber gloves. Basically, we've gone through about 3 or 4 gallons of bleach.
You gonna keep doing this?
I'm going to go out tomorrow. Get those 75 birds, and hopefully that's kind of the end of it. It does seem to be tapering off, but I think what we did was
You could have saved eagles.
Yeah, I don't know. But you know what it is? These things certainly were an eyesore. they were ultimately going to be a health hazard. And, you know, Georgia Pond is a water body that we own, and we've taken responsibility for it. I think Georgia Association appreciates it. I think Georgia, Friends of Georgia appreciate it, and we've had nothing but like positive responses from the public on it.
So has DEC autopsied or tested any of these birds to our knowledge?
I believe they tested, they found down by Louse Point, they found a snowy owl that had
They've been
succumbed.
finding bird flu
And they
all over the island.
verified that it was bird flu. But you know what it is when you see it die off like this,
Yeah.
they had a verified outbreak over on the North Fork. So when I called DEC, they weren't surprised. They said, what you're describing is a bird flu event.
Yeah.
So.
The only other thing it could be is poison.
No, because you know what happens is poison the bird. I think poison would be something a little different. What's happening with these birds, as the DEC explained it, what happened with us down here this winter, most of our water bodies were well iced over. There was very little open water for these birds to basically overnight in that. So what happens is, I think the DEC likened it to sending your kids to daycare or preschool. They all come home sick. Okay.
They're all together, they're in a weakened state because of food and
We
stuff.
had it last year too. We had, because we even pulled the same post from our website from last year and Allison brought it
Did we
down.
have it here last year? I know they had some incidents over on the North Fork last year. I don't remember seeing birds
Well,
down here.
we put it up on, we were, asked by DEC to put it up and we did. So it's on our website. I think it was very minor though, because it wasn't that cold. We didn't have the animals
Last
going
year,
together.
Actually, DEC said last year, upstate New York, and that saw a pretty severe outbreak. And, they weren't surprised, let's put it this way, that we had this situation this year, but hopefully it's nearly over.
I've been seeing geese flying from the north toward, coming to our area. So I think they are migrating now and hopefully,
Well,
long lines of them.
they're coming from the north,
Yeah,
going south.
yeah,
Yeah, well, that's the reverse, the way they migrate.
right. So
Okay, that's the reverse. In the fall, they
They will go.
migrate from north to south. In the spring, they migrate from south to north.
Yeah, they want some
What
cold
you're
weather.
seeing is we have a lot of resident geese here, and the Georgia Pond colony basically goes from Georgia Pond to Schwank's to Foster's Farm and stuff along 27, hits Babinski's fields. They lay over in Sag Pond. They lay over in Georgia Pond. And oddly enough, and we may have had some birds in Montauk, but I haven't seen them. And I think it may be a case in Montauk. The birds there are not interfacing with the birds here. It may happen, it may come yet, but
Unfortunately, it's
far.
also starting to show in Hook Pond, so we have to keep an eye
Well,
on
I'm
that.
going down there. I went down there on Friday. Most of it was froze over still on
but-
Friday.
But it's no longer,
But you sent me a video which clearly was a bird that was symptomatic.
actually, Matt Chapman, who's
Yeah.
hosting us tonight.
They
took
do
video.
they do that sort of circular thing, and you'll see the birds towards the end. They're like drawing circles in the sand with their beaks. It's kind of a sad case. Their eyes are very swollen. It's pretty darn disgusting. How they go, but, and I did get a call, you forwarded on that there's a bunch of birds over by Hook Mill, and I'll check that out
Not Hook
tomorrow.
Mill, Gardner Mill.
Gardner Mill, I'm
In the
sorry,
field.
Gardner Mill. I'll check that out tomorrow and I'll talk to the village. By the way, I want to thank the village of East Hampton for the help that they showed with this, because when I did speak to the village, talk to the mayor on Friday. He didn't even ask or even make a comment. He started off with, what can I do to help? Which was huge because we did dispose of roughly 400 birds, on the village property, and they dug a pit for us. So we want to thank them for all of their help.
No, thank you too, because
Yeah, thanks, Jim.
Yeah,
Yeah, did you see our stickers?
can we authorize?
Actually, this was Tim Miller did this, and I was kind of moved. It's a little self-promoting, but he.
The high point of Jim's thing.
It actually was, this is the only thing that got me through it, is the other morning, I was joking with him, I said, we're calling this Operation Feathered Fury. And like 20 minutes later, he sends me,
He's a
like,
little tall.
emails me like this logo, and then when we were working down in Georgia, he shows up and he's got stickers. I stuck one in the front
You
door.
get some t-shirts made too.
It's
Really easy to do.
Yeah.
Would you put it?
Yeah, put it around the front door here, right at eye level.
That's great. Good thinking.
Should we,
Francis,
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
Francis, can I just let you know that Keith is on Zoom from McLean Associates? Just wanted to make sure you guys
Oh,
knew
shoot, yeah.
that he was here.
Francis, should we authorize any funds for this?
So we did already?
We already did.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm gonna be sending a little bit more of a bill, but it's not gonna be anything like.
Okay,
Sign
so
off on
we'll-
your community service.
What?
We need community service hours.
Me? Tell you what, Tobias is needing some community service
I've been telling
hours.
him that.
Send him Danny, it'll definitely
all right,
scare
guys,
him
we have
straight.
somebody who's been waiting on Zoom for a while.
Great.
We have a request from LK McLean Associates Engineering and Surveying, DPC, on behalf of the town of East Hampton to replace approximately 660 linear feet of steel breakwater at the inlet 3 Mile Harbor at Sammy's Beach.
This is the, here's,
didn't we just approve that?
No.
This is,
Who's on?
Keith Masseria from McLean.
Keith, are you there?
Just unmuted.
Hi, this is Keith Masseria from McLean. Can you hear me?
Yes.
yes.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
I don't know if you guys have any specific questions, but it's basically an in-place replacement of the existing steel breakwater, 660 linear feet along 3 Mile Harbor. It's an in-kind, in-place replacement. I believe we're increasing the height by about 12 inches.
Here's a set of plans, basically, and some pictures of the existing bulkhead.
Yeah, there's holes littered throughout that you could see at a low tide, and there's some soil loss leaking out through those holes. So we're looking to prevent that from happening and preventing it from filling in the channel.
yeah. Hey Keith, are you replacing steel with steel?
We're doing steel with steel, epoxy coated steel. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, the structure, the way this bulkhead is engineered, that the steel sheets are driven.
Straight
Steel sheets are the structure, basically.
No, it didn't seem like be a good candidate for plastic. This is,
No, you're good.
it's just
You
too,
need some
too
strength
rare.
out there.
Yeah.
It's a pretty high exposure as well.
I don't have a problem with this.
No.
If the rest of the board's comfortable, I'd like to make a motion to approve it.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Anyone opposed? Okay, Keith, go get him.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yep. Hog Creek, we have a request by Chris Carrillo Esquire on behalf of David Wagner Irrevocable Trust of 237 Kings Point Road, Suffolk County Tax Map 300-24-1-32 for approval to perform coastal bluff restoration cleanup. Now, this is a failed project, I believe, that.
Chris, are you on, Chris?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, do you want to explain this? You want me to?
Jim, I'll let you take the lead, but first I'd just like to say that this is an existing real estate transactional client of mine. So recusing myself of the trustee hat this evening with a real estate hat on, unfortunately. So I'm just letting that be known for the record. But I'll just give a quick once over, Jim, and then you can kind of take it from there. But yeah, this was a sort of a failed project. There was an NRSP that was granted in 2022 and expired in 2025. Both Jim and I have had pretty lengthy conversations with Brian Frank on this, and there are now currently New York State and ZBA new permit applications in for a hard structure type revetment. And so after talks with Brian, he kind of advised that he's not looking for a renewal on this one. He really just wants to see this kind of coastal bluff area cleaned up, which means removal of any non-native type rocks or other materials, and to close out the permit, knowing that there are a few other applications in the pipeline. And just looking at this property from above, there's 15 to 20 contiguous properties directly to the west that all benefit from a hard structured type revetment, and that's what this property now is going to be going for. So sort of a finish up, clean up, get the equipment on the beach down at Clearwater, come down the beach and remove some non-native rocks that my client tried to put in there, which are really kind of outside the constraints of this permit. So it's a kind of clean up and close out situation, but that's the long and short of it, Jim.
Yeah, what this was, we discussed this. Brian he isn't looking for revegetation. He's not looking for a plan. He's essentially seeing this as the most expeditious approach to this is to reset it. They had put some stones, larger stones in, tucked them into the bluff that was not in the scope of their permits. They had done, I think there's some fencing and maybe some core logs that were improperly installed. And you know what? Property's in contract. They're looking to transfer the ownership here. I think everybody's looking forward to getting past this mess and closing out what's there. So with that, I would, if there's no questions.
Yeah, and just that the access has to be along the beach. So
yes,
that's our hook. And, it really needs to be done expeditiously because of the.
You got it. So that said, because this access is going to close out April, essentially March 31st, I would like to make a motion to approve this, convey that permit that this has to be done essentially in the next couple of weeks, and let's move on. If it helps, Chris, Ken Neary from Clearwater reached out to me the other day, and they have a stockpile of sand down there that if they need sand to make back the toe of this bluff, which I'm going to guess they probably do, that sand is available. They can buy it from Clearwater.
Okay, I'll let the current owner know. I believe he used to be a member of the board down there as well, so he knows all of those players, and he was going to get the approval from them to use their beach access. So I will let him know. Thanks.
Should I make a motion to approve?
I did. Does anybody want to second it? Tree second it?
I made the motion, or
I'll second it.
Okay.
Well, Bill might want to second it.
You second it.
I've done enough tonight.
Okay.
All right, so Patrice made the motion.
All right.
Jim seconded.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay,
Thanks, everybody.
move on. Is there anybody else on Zoom that needs?
That's all for now. Yeah, no one else.
Okay, I'm seeing 4 people listed on there.
There should be Chris, us, and then just us. There shouldn't be those.
Okay, thank you. Nappy Lazy Point, the applicant asked that we table this one until April.
Yeah, this, this is something I would like to meet with the owner, with the applicant and their agent, and then carry that back to this board. I think having a discussion about it now isn't gonna help anybody. I think it's just gonna muddy the waters here.
Yeah.
Docks, winter weather and dock damage. Is that you, John?
I guess we just wanted to mention this to anybody who's watching who owns a dock, that there's been a lot of dock damage, especially in Hog Creek and probably in the southern end of Napeague for any docks of pilings that have left in for the winter. And so, we've had one application for rebuilding a dock from Accabonac so far, but there is a trustee permit required to repair or rebuild docks, and that should be understood by dock owners. I'm going to try to get a mass emailing out to dock owners in vulnerable areas to remind them that it's very important for them to take care of this and apply to us for doing the work, which we'll deal with quickly as possible. So
I did a look around as best I could, looking between people's properties and such, and I did around Hog Creek and Folkestone area, up in there, some 3 Mile Harbor and a little bit in Accabonac that I could, the ones that I could see. And I would, if I have to guesstimate, probably 70% of them show some sort of damage. So we should be expecting a lot of applications.
Was it like broken things or lifted pilings?
Lifted pilings and the ramps are all, it's, some of them aren't that bad, but others are like pretty destroyed. All right. Kayaks, revisit discussion regarding private kayak racks on hedges, banks, and public racks adjacent to Old House Landing.
this is something that I, to tell you the truth, I'd kind of forgotten about, but we did discuss this back in, I believe it was October.
Yeah.
When it became apparent that someone had built a kayak rack adjacent to their staircase landing on Hedges Banks Beach. And we had discussed whether we wanted to permit these things, and said we would address it after the first of the year. Subsequently, I got an email, or an email was passed on to me from a resident of that area who, apparently the person who made the inquiry in October about whether we would allow people to build kayak racks on the beach because his neighbor had one. He sent out a mass mailing to the landfall association, all those, there's several subdivisions in there, about this, and said that the trustees were going to revisit this after the first of the year. And the woman who sent me the email asked about that, and also asked whether we might consider putting a public kayak rack at the end of Old House Landing Road for, I guess, people in the neighborhood who don't front on the beach. So I thought it's something I want to bring back to the board. We started to discuss it back then, and is it something we want to consider, allowing, people who have staircases to the beach, which we permit, to build, a rack that would go adjacent to, or maybe part of their staircase landing to house their kayaks.
I wouldn't have a problem with it as long as it doesn't impede the public being able to.
Yeah, I think that's when we discussed that first, it was agreed that, it wouldn't want to come out past any staircase landing. That
Now, the
staircase
public
landing.
one at the end of Old House Landing, is there room down there for it?
It gets tight at times.
No, that's why I'm asking.
You might have to really tuck right up
That's
to the
something
edge
that
of the
maybe we
beach grass.
should check out.
Yeah.
And
And here's the other thing. I mean, we were putting these kayak racks in areas where people had been storing them on the beach anyway, in order to get them off the grass. And now we're being asked to consider installing them for sheer convenience.
well, except they're not, I think, look at it as the good thing is they, up to this point, they haven't been storing them on the grass.
Right, so why?
Well, there's a
why
couple.
start storing them?
Well, there's a couple of things. One,
It's public, we would
it has
charge the same
become,
fees that
it
we
has
charge
become a
everybody else.
convenience and a popular convenience. And if we're considering private racks, racks on the beach, which we own for private use, because they, are associated with upland private property. Is it, if we have a request, I don't know, does it change the equation any?
I like the idea of putting additional kayak racks like the ones that we have, where we own them, we, have they call it like you register for one and you get one or not, and we charge a fee. That's fair. I think that's fair because everyone has an opportunity to get one of those slots. I kind of think that's the way to go. And we have, there are other pieces of land where we could think about doing it, putting them. They certainly are well utilized.
Well, as Francis said, the question is, are we going to change our rationale for putting kayak racks up from protecting beach grass and, natural areas that people are dumping their kayaks on already, or going to create new kayak rack?
So when I look at the kayak racks that we have, I don't see a lot of beach grass underneath the kayak racks.
Well, it's because they're placed away from the beach grass, or agreed, but beach grass can encroach into it.
Previously, people were storing them on the beach grass
Right.
in these areas. Every place where we have kayak racks at this point is solely because people were storing them on the grass.
But can't we make a planning decision and say we'd like to put some here, in whatever spot, because it makes sense?
Changing our rationale, and the question is that what we want to do?
Personally, I think I would support that. Because I think you're rewarding behavior. If your criteria is that you want people to do something that's damaging to the beach grass, and then you'll put in a kayak rack, as opposed to just saying proactively, I would like to see a couple more kayak racks.
But the point is, no, it's not being utilized now. And one person has asked, so we're going to go through the process of constructing a rack for one person.
Maybe.
And creating a
If
lottery.
you build it, they will come.
Maybe, maybe not.
It's not a great expense to put the kayak rack in. And keep in mind, we do have the issue of having more people asking for kayak space than we have availability.
this particular
This is
one-
not a place that I would personally,
I mean, in
take up.
answer to your question,
Wait,
your
1 second.
point.
Generally, can I just say, generally, they're also inside bodies of water, creeks, whatever. And this just goes out into open water. Well, is it really a necessity there?
Well, two things. One, part of the reason we talked about the private kayak racks associated with the staircases is that a lot of these, a lot of private homeowners who live on the water do store their kayaks in the grass and the vegetation adjacent to the water. And that's what the case on Hedges Banks. And so in a way, that is following our original
Correct, I
intent.
agree with that one.
Second point is, to your point of only one person, I mean, we could write her back and say, you're only one person.
Well, apparently she contacted the entire.
I think that would be the next step. I think we'd have a petition coming back.
I don't think we just seem to like fill up the kayak racks no matter what. Even the one at Little Fresh Pond, people didn't at first say like, they don't want to walk through the dream, but then they love it.
See, personally, I think like Sammy's Beach would be more appropriate.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, well, you could do Sammy's Beach as well.
Whatever.
Yeah, Sammy's Beach might be more appropriate.
I think so.
I just wanted to.
And they'd want Sammy's Beach on the bay, on the
inside.
harbor side.
Right.
That's gonna anger the clammers who pull their trucks down there. There's limited beach there. And a lot of clammers pull their trucks down there.
There's a path on Squaw Road and it goes down to the water there. That might be a nice place too, because people like to go there.
What, in that town property?
Yeah. And it's
You have to put that on the town property. There's not enough beach there to.
very little, but.
Yeah, we couldn't put it on the town property. We're gonna have to be on a beach.
Well,
Well,
I can see, I mean, I don't know. But what about the racks associated with the staircases?
I'm okay with that, honestly, because, John, we've all seen those staircases. If you're trying to carry your kayak down those staircases, I wouldn't want to do that more than once or twice a season.
but do we have, I think the real question is that something we want to regulate?
I do, certainly, because you know what, if we don't regulate it, then we're gonna have issues of people putting them too far out on the beach, or
I think they have to be
or
within
that.
the structure.
I think a lot of times they could actually just put some cross pieces on their landing and hang them.
Yeah, most of them
Hang them on their own
they hang them on the side of the stairs.
To me, I think that's
Part of the
fine.
thing.
Fine for them to do as part of the stair, which we're not charging for? Oops.
What's going on there?
I have no idea. It's like some sort of murder plot.
It might be time to make a motion to close the meeting.
Motion, we replace this table.
You have to pull the ring down and lock it. What happened to that? Disappeared.
Is that thing okay down there?
It's fine, yeah.
I was thinking of doing the same thing, but.
We're almost done. We're almost done.
No, to do it.
So getting,
Well, I guess the question is, are we gonna, if, the idea was if it's a separate kayak rack, we charge for it. It's permitted, it's an annual fee. It's a structure on our land. We're not currently charging for staircase landings on the beach.
If it's attached to the staircase, is it something that we already gave them a permit for the staircase.
Yeah, if it's their
Put some
staircase.
hooks on the structure, to hang their kayak.
Should there be a
So
limit
we
on
even be
how?
involved.
Is this just like for 2 kayaks per staircase?
Yeah, I would say there's got to be a limit. Well, I don't know, the staircase we can really say. I mean, I think if we sanction standalone kayak racks, we limit it to 2, 4, whatever, however many we think is appropriate, but I don't know if we can tell a guy how many kayaks he can or can't hang on his staircase.
How many kayaks should he need?
Yeah, listen, sometimes
Yeah,
you
you know,
want
you
different kind of
can
houses.
house guests
Maybe it's not about
The
this.
sit-ons, the sit-ins.
We know the value of a kayak rack spot, so it may be rented.
So would they get a permit for these, or?
Well, that's the question.
If it's not attached, if it's not part of their stair, I would say no. But if they're gonna build a kayak rack down there, I think it's just one of those things, it's whatever the permit fee is and the annual cost.
It's like part of their staircase, part of their
And
stairway.
if it gets washed out or damaged, it's their responsibility to retrieve the remains and dispose of.
Who's gonna work on this? Bring it back.
Work on what, the details?
Yeah.
I'll bring back some options, I guess we can decide on some options. Okay,
Next meeting?
next meeting.
Next meeting. There you
All
go.
right. Let's move on to administrative. The following bills need to be paid. Louis Joe's Avalon Villas LLP, Seaview, $40,476.65. Stark, $465.50. And Driftwood, $385. Bills for November, January, and February. We have Merchants Bonding Company, Seaview lawsuit, annual bond premium charge, $13,886. Staples, $123.04.
Make a motion to pay the bills.
Second?
All in favor? Six of us, okay.
Yes, Patrice, second.
Anybody have anything they want to bring up?
Motion to close.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you, everybody. It was a long
Have a good night, board.